Business Means. Welcome to the studio, Yuka Roya, our business editor. Great to see you, as always. The tech billionaire Elon Musk has lost his lawsuit against OpenAI and its chief, Sam Altman. Tell us more.
Well, Mark, this is really a blockbuster lawsuit that's been drawing a lot of attention over the past couple of weeks. A 9-member jury in California unanimously ruled against Elon Musk and said that he brought the case to the court too late, beyond the statute of limitations. The world's richest man filed the lawsuit in 2024, seeking $150 billion in damages. He accused OpenAI and its bosses Sam Altman and Greg Brockman of manipulating him into donating $38 million when they co-founded OpenAI in 2015 with a non-profit mission. He then fell out with Altman and left the firm in 2018, and OpenAI set up a for-profit business the following year. In the trial, Musk described the defendants' action as, quote, stealing a charity. The verdict came after 11 days of testimony and arguments. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. The trial came at a critical time for OpenAI, that's preparing for a possible IPO that could value the business at $1 trillion. Musk's xAI is now part of SpaceX, which is also preparing for a stock market listing. OpenAI's lawyer says he's delighted with the ruling, although Musk's side could still appeal. Let's take a listen.
The finding of the jury confirms that what this lawsuit was a hypocritical attempt to sabotage a competitor and to overcome a long history of very bad predictions about what OpenAI has been and will become. It's not a technical decision, it's a substantive one. It says you brought your claims too late and you did it because you were sitting on them to use them as a weapon of a competitor who can't compete in the marketplace.
So watch this space. Hot on the heels of a G2 summit in Beijing between the presidents Trump and Xi Jinping, G7 finance ministers are gathered here in Paris to prepare for next month's Evian summit.
Well, Mark, the two-day meeting comes against the backdrop of the war in Iran and the energy crisis resulting from it. So safeguarding economic security is high on the agenda. The host, France, also placed reducing global imbalances, partnerships with developing countries and supply chain resilience, particularly for rare earths and critical minerals, at the heart of the discussion. Without being named, China is high on the minds of policymakers as its stranglehold on rare earths and its export drive to offset weak domestic consumption has been putting a lot of pressure on companies in G7 countries. The ongoing geopolitical tensions come on top of Donald Trump's tariffs disrupting global trade, and last week's bilateral summit ended without a breakthrough in a spat between the world's two largest economies. Here's France's Finance Minister Roland Lescure speaking before the start of the meeting today.
At a time where global imbalances are suddenly unsustainable, at a time where raw materials and critical minerals have become critical in the supply chains of the world, and at a time where the most vulnerable countries are faced with a crisis that's affecting them dramatically, we need to make sure that we can show the world that together we can address those challenges and engage.
Meanwhile, the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz is keeping oil prices high. The head of the International Energy Agency at the G7 again warned about the severity of the ongoing energy crisis, saying commercial oil inventories were depleting rapidly with only a few weeks' worth left.
Donald Trump has insisted that the US gets almost no oil from the Gulf, but gasoline prices are rising to record levels there. How come?
Well, the average price per gallon in the United States now stands at $4.5 across the country, compared to below $3 in February. A new analysis shows American drivers have spent more than $40 billion in extra fuel costs since the start of the war. Higher energy prices have pulled overall inflation higher. The consumer price index in April rose to 3.8%, the highest in 3 years. The OECD predicts US inflation to hit 4.2% this year, the highest in the G7. So why are oil prices rising? Luke Trago has more.
For motorists in the United States, the pain's approaching an all-time high, with many who can no longer even afford a full tank of fuel.
I would love to get a full tank. Unfortunately, I don't have $80 to spare.
I don't know what a full tank of gas looks like at this moment because a lot of consumers are putting half tanks or what they can afford into their gas tank.
In fact, new research has put a figure on their new fuel bill. $41.5 billion in extra spending since the US and Israel went to war in Iran at the end of February, sending a supply shock cascading around the world.
With supply impacted in such a drastic way, it's been having a major impact on oil prices, which have funneled down to rising gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel prices. If prices continue to rise and the strait remains closed, then I would start to believe that it will impact more American summer travel plans.
Those prices aren't set to come down anytime soon. With much of the Middle East's oil unable to get out through the blocked Strait of Hormuz, nations long reliant on Gulf oil are turning elsewhere, specifically to net producer the US. Australia, for instance, rarely imported US oil before the war. In March and April, though, the US exported 4.5 million barrels of fuel and other refined products down under. Washington has tried to temper the oil shock by both easing shipping restrictions and environmental regulations and releasing record levels of oil from strategic reserves. That's left US stocks depleting fast and kept prices high, with domestic consumers now having to pay more just to keep fuel within US borders.
Luke Schrager there. Volatility in global bond markets is also a very big concern at this G7 meeting.
Well, worries over inflation risks from the Middle East conflict have caused the sell-off of government bonds and raised borrowing costs for many rich countries. The US 10-year Treasury yield stands at around 4.6%. In the UK, it's above 5%. On Monday, Japan's 10-year bond yield hit the highest level since 1996, while its long-term bond yields, like 30-year or 40-year bonds, rose to record high levels above 4%. And consumers in the United States and other nations are also starting to pay more to borrow money. In the US, the 30-year mortgage rate has risen to 6.36%. And in Germany, interest rate on 10-year loans has increased to about 3.6%. The UK has seen the sharpest rise in borrowing costs among leading economies. The average rate on a 2-year fixed mortgage has increased to 5.1% in April, that from below 4% at the end of February. And that's it from the business desk.
Life across the board getting more expensive. Yuka, thank you very much.